So it's lovely to see you again, Johannes.
Likewise, Andrew.
And
Good
it's
to
good to
see you.
have you on the Second Axial Age YouTube channel.
All right. Pleasure to
Um,
be here.
Neither should I.
In this channel. Nice studio you got there, Sasha.
Well, let me begin with a quote from the immortal Sam Harris in a recent podcast he opened. So, okay, it's all coronavirus all the time. So I figure that's probably what we'll be speaking about in some capacity or another, to wit,
Yeah.
the coronavirus and matter spiritual, or coronavirus and the sacred. But before we get into that, maybe we can just talk about the fact that it's March 18th, 2020, and things are rapidly developing. So I can tell you how things are here in the American Southwest, and maybe you can share how things are looking in London.
Yes.
So really things started to shut down here in this part of the Southwest just a couple of days ago. My wife and I, on Friday the 13th, started our home quarantine, and it's very quiet. It is, as you said in the run-up to this conversation, a ghost town here.
Yeah.
And viewers might not know yet that approximately 70 million Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So we're actually just today starting to see unemployment being filed for here at extraordinary rates. So it's becoming more and more precarious, I think, for a number of people here. But my wife and I are doing fine in that capacity. So tell me, how is it looking for you in London?
So my wife and I, we are self-isolating.
Yeah.
We are not sick. We have no symptoms. And frankly, I started seeing things emerge on Twitter in mid-January.
Yeah.
So we started preparing by the end of January and started telling people to perhaps prepare a bit. So we've stocked up on food and on vinegar, for example, is a great way of apparently killing viruses, which is what was used in Europe during the Black Death. So that's something. Maybe that's just a cheap way of.
So your flat has a particular scent at the present time.
Yes. No, we do mix in some perfume.
I see.
To keep everything fresh. But we're trying to stay indoors as good as possible. It's a ghost town anyways, which is strange for London. We live in East London. My wife has a vintage shop here. Basically every shop is now closed. This is usually a place where you have, on a Sunday, probably 100,000 just tourists pushing through. It's a ghost town. No one's there anymore. So we'll have to see what happens in terms of businesses closing down. If this persists and if the government doesn't step in, there'll be closure of thousands of pubs, small businesses who live hand to mouth. They have got bills to pay every month. And when the revenue stream breaks away, it's mayhem. So it's not easy to. We have no idea what's going to happen, obviously, but it is a strange situation. Sometimes I wake up and I think, is this actually real, or is it just in the hyper modern sense something we see on the news? But
yeah, I remember waking up out of deep sleep, and there's just a moment when I don't remember, and then memory comes online.
Yeah.
And then there is that sense of the surreal nature.
Not that we sleep much. At present. But really not. I mean, I'm not sleeping well for the most part. But there's also there's something that's beginning to show itself, right? Cracks in Gestalt, to speak with Heidegger, cracks in technology, cracks in capitalism, the fragility of this ridiculous system of supply chains that are, delivering on the minute when something's needed. The fact that medicine is produced in India and China and then shipped all over the world, we're completely dependent on countries that are extremely far away, which is just for environmental reasons absurd. So that, you know, people living paycheck to paycheck now, I mean, we will very likely use savings to get through this, and hopefully there will be some left at the end of this. But I know that there are people in this country who have got zero savings, who have no credit line, and we don't have children, so you know that makes it easier. We don't have to care for anyone else than just us at present, and maybe people around us who we can help. And so I fear that it will be devastating to many people in this country, because don't forget that most poor people in Northern Europe live in England and Wales and Scotland. They've got the poorest population. Not London, of course, you know, but everybody else is outside London. People are, not everybody, but there is just a lot of poverty. And yeah, so it's not ideal.
Oh, that's a surprising conclusion to draw.
to bring in a bit of British understatement.
Yes. Well, I will try to match you with my American earnestness. So we will.
Yeah, my Bavarian German will kick in very soon. I mean, it's brutal, right?
Right.
And this is something that we haven't faced yet, that we don't know. This generation doesn't know it. My parents don't know any of this at this scale. Last 70 years.
No, it's striking to me that Nassim Taleb's analysis from his book Anti-Fragility, I think, is pretty good. In one important respect, he talks there about three different concepts: fragility, resilience, and anti-fragility, a term he coins. He suggests that fragility refers to objects like wine glasses. You drop them from a certain height and they easily shatter.
Yeah.
So it could be said that we have a very fragile set of systems, and we're in the midst of a meta crisis, as some sense-making people would say, right? Why are we in that? Because of the fragility, the tenuous, precarious nature of all these concatenated systems. Some, however, have been speaking for some time about resilience, which one of my friends defines as the ability to take a punch. So you think of resilient people are those who are able to withstand or endure.
Yeah.
I think of a certain form of Christian martyrdom. I'm able to continue to slog on, even though life is a vale of tears. But rarely is it spoken about, and rarely are we talking about preparation or living in terms of anti-fragility. That is to say that things actually benefit from the pressures and forces placed upon them, and they grow stronger as a consequence. So we are very far from an anti-fragile moment, or from cultivating anti-fragile people. And we're pretty far from having too many people in resilient places. We have systems that are fragile, and in ways we might or might want to talk about, we have people who are also fragile from a sociological, psychological, and even a philosophical point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. No, yeah, go on.
So I'm curious, before we start to unfold the conversation about how each of us is doing, I've been taking the word concern as my stance, as my philosophico-ethical stance. I don't yet feel deep fear, and as you know, I meditate a good deal, so I'm not actually noticing fear arising. That's partly owing to circumstance and partly owing to training. I would say. I'm also not involved in what Jordan Hall in one podcast recently called anti-panic. That is extraordinary forms of carelessness undertaken by 20-something males often, where they're involved in licking door handles or going to Palm Beach, Florida en masse. So the stance I'm taking so far is just to feel concerned. Something does feel off. There is something rotten in Denmark, as Hamlet said, right? Or, Yeats, right? The center cannot hold. Things are falling apart.
Yeah.
All that starts to feel as if it's the case. There's an uncanniness, as we spoke about in another conversation, I
Oh
feel all
yeah,
that, but there's a concern, and it's an attempt to try to stay in this place of concern, concern that's born as best as possible of assessing what's going on as
yeah,
best as possible.
yeah.
How are you feeling? How are you
Well, it's only March, right? And April is the cruelest month, as T.S. Eliot
doing?
once poetized.
You know that that's a
And
reference to Chaucer, right? It's from
yeah,
Chaucer's Canterbury Tales that opens with, in April, and there's showers, and it's beautiful, time to go on a pilgrimage. And then, of course, we have Eliot's April is the cruelest month. Here comes the wasteland.
in the wasteland, and of course in the chapter of the wasteland, which is entitled "The Burial of the Dead."
Yes, yes.
When I lived in Italy when I was a bit younger,
Mm.
I have friends in Italy. I have friends here who suffer from this disease. Someone who's pregnant and
Oh my
has
goodness.
this disease, very young lady. I have heard from Italy is a country where everything is outside, just like Spain, right? You
Mm.
go out, facciamo un po' di chiacchiere. That's what they say. We make a bit of
Mm. Mm.
chit chat. That's the Italian way, is to be outside and have a spritz and talk.
Mm. Mm.
And the cities are shut down.
Mm. Mm.
It's heartbreaking. It's even sounding like a cliche, perhaps is fine for a moment. It really is. People, and one of the things that perhaps that gets concealed in reporting these numbers, because ultimately they're just numbers, right? So, it's 10,000 cases in Italy and that many deaths. But yes, but where do they die? The people who die very often in loneliness. They die in field hospitals on their own, without their families, in these ridiculous, military beds, and drowning in their lungs. That's what it's been described as. The trauma that will be triggered by this is tremendous, and it is for the first time planetary. It's a planetary trauma. This is on such a massive scale. It touches everyone everywhere, and also, of course, because we see it develop in what people refer to as real time. We see it develop minute by minute, even though, of course, weirdly enough, these numbers that we see are being reported from the past, because it takes time to run these tests, and then test results take time. So the numbers we see also are numbers from a couple of days ago, perhaps even 4 or 5 days ago in some cases. But we're seeing this develop, and I think it might be overwhelming to many. And this kind of rotten carelessness that you've just described, I wasn't even aware of this, shows that what's lacking. But this is not there are people who are stepping up, right? What does it mean to be responsible? It means to respond to a certain call, to an ethical call, to the call that always calls upon the human being to be human. And this is a moment to step up as such, right? For you and I, we're the meditators in all of this. And what does it mean to meditate? To meditate means to care, to quote you, to be concerned, right? Meditate doesn't mean to, as is the case in the world of total work, to you pull out my app on at night and click through it for 5 minutes so I can sleep more efficiently, so I can work more efficiently the next day. One of your favorite authors, Joseph Pieper, actually does describe this, right? It would be absurd to think that people would pray at night just to sleep better. Right. Well, little did he know that, with Buddhism Inc., this is what's now, or now maybe not no longer occurring. But to meditate means to be concerned with beings. One of the oldest quotes we have from ancient Greek wisdom, from the Occidental wisdom, is by Periander. I think it's melita tan pan. I might get the Greek wrong, but that literally means to be concerned with everything, with beings in their being, to speak more philosophically, perhaps. And that is what meditation is. So what we're trying to do is to draw sense from out of what's happening in real time, which is also, I think, a unique situation for the first time in human history, is that we sit down and have conversations about a crisis that's unfolding, trying to make sense of it philosophically and spiritually as it's occurring and beginning to show itself. And this is, I mean, if I may be not optimistic, but perhaps a visionary for a second, is there is something that we can now gently point towards, which is another way of being is possible. And this is to no longer, to quote you, live in this non or anti-human world of total work, but to move on beyond. So to come back to your point on fragility and anti-fragility, these supply chains that serve to increase capital's gains, right? It just, that's what they're there for. They increase the gains of capital for the sake of increasing the gains of capital, at a great cost to the environment and to just nature herself, and of course to human beings as well, who have to work according to the demands of these supply chains, which are quite apparently now, which we're now beginning to see, extremely fragile. And it's weirdly enough, it seemed like a perfect system, right? This is what in framing, to quote Heidegger, in framing wants to be exclusive. So it wants to be,
Ooh la la, it wants to be exclusive, right?
Yeah, but that's what
no. Yeah, I understand.
It's just like total work wants to be exclusive. It's like it wants you to be a worker, and in framing wants to appear as I'm the only possibility of being. I'm in framing, and this is all there is, which is,
it's like a dating app in which it's both the app itself and the only one on there. I guess this is the one.
But this system, and this is what's striking about it, is that it seems, and this is reflected in the buildings this thing, whatever this is, builds, right? Like, I keep coming back to the hideous shard in London. I don't know if you have seen pictures of it. It is a literal shard. It cuts into the sky. It cuts where gods should reside. It looks unfinished. It looks like a techno version of Mordor. What is it? Is it Sauron in the Lord of the Rings, the evil guy, Sauron's tower?
I have long hair, but I have to say I don't know much about Tolkien.
You're not Aragorn or something. And you could be like a modern day Gandalf or something. But the buildings, this that's just called in framing, that it builds reflect this cold, like even deathless, lifeless sphere, in which seems perfect, right? Everything is perfect, everything's sterile and hygienic, and weirdly enough, it's so fragile. It isn't as perfect and as not even resilient. Right. It just it takes a little piece of stupid machinery. A virus is not intelligent, to bring everything to a halt. Right. And the desperate cry. Sorry,
yeah. Why don't we talk about the state of affairs as we both understand them? What this virus is actually opening up, because I think you're actually already going there, and then maybe later on we can see what it could be pointing to, which you also alluded to. So there's a German philosopher. No, that's not true. There's a Korean philosopher living in Germany, and his name is unpronounceable, at least to me.
Byung-Chul Han.
Yeah, there you are. That's right. Yeah, and in one of his short books, he talks about the aesthetic in terms of the smooth and seamless. Right? And this is a critique. So at least what we're seeing aesthetically in terms of the building you're describing is this humanist, or you might also call it transhumanist vision, and it's frictionless. It's utterly and completely wave-like or smooth. And as you said, it's not just reaching into the sky, but it's cutting into the sky, where you said gods would otherwise reside, or God would be, or any primitive people would be able to have a cosmology in which there is something
exactly.
on high.
Yeah.
So what do you think this is actually exposing in us with regard to the sacred or the unholy?
Yeah, one of the things I said in a video a couple of days ago was that last year, I think it was, when there was a picture of a black hole going around where you saw nothing. Right? I mean, you saw dark. I mean, I could have probably faked this with my iPhone at home, right? It look, oh, look, there's dark and there's some shades of light flashing through it. That's a black hole. And I said,
It's non-representational art. It's just
oh, sorry.
non-representational.
No, but look. I mean, we get excited about these things, but that's no longer our cosmology, because the cosmos implies closeness, and a cosmos implies the continuum. It implies not bursting open, because all of modernity is this explosion of power, an explosion of abstract intelligence, and to no end, right? I mean, imagined multiverses going all the way up and all the way down to the smallest and ever smaller particles. And I said facetiously a bit, or in exaggerating, to, because sometimes as a thinker, you have to scream, as Nietzsche did very often. Sometimes perhaps someone wakes up for a second.
Adorno once said that all truth is exaggeration, but a bunch, right? Adorno thought all truth is exaggeration. That is, you have to raise the stakes, raise the voice in order to create the kind of speech that can shock people into thinking, shock people into thinking.
Yeah. And so, I said, are people going to pray to this black hole now, when it actually gets real for a second, where this smooth aesthetics is showing cracks, is showing that we are ultimately finite beings who are, thrown into this and trying to figure out why and what for and where this is going. And it leaves, so I'm not going to speculate about what's going to happen with, will people be more spiritual or religious after this? I'm not sure. But I think what it will very likely trigger is a sort of a memento mori moment, where we do become, again, one way or another, aware of our mortality and finitude and fragility. And that can, in my best, in my, what I can hope for is that it will actually spark a rinascimento, a rebirth, a renaissance. And that true renaissance, what this will look like, we don't know. But what it does reveal is that we, right now, I think, not speaking for everyone, but at least I think for the Western world, we can say this. But I don't know, but what's going on in Judaism or Islam, they can very likely still pray. But in a secularized society as ours, it's difficult to say and see where people will turn.
Right. I think there are, to simplify to an extreme, there are 3 games in town right now. 3 identifications. The first is I am the body. I'm the perishable body.
Yeah.
As the body goes, so go I. The second is I am the mind. I am the hyper intellectual mind that you already were pointing to. So you find that in academia as well as in the tech space. The third is, as we've talked about, I am the doer. That is, I stand in the world as someone who's willing, and that will is operating in the world and on myself. And that's, as you've already hinted at, much of the modern adventure, the shift toward volition as the mode of primary concern, as the modus operandi, we might joke, is the mode of operation. Of course, it's the mode of operation. It's precisely what gets things done. Those are the 3 basic ones. Now we can situate that account of I'm the body, I'm the mind. We actually shift. This is from a meditational perspective for a moment. We tend to shift throughout the course of the day from I'm the doer. What am I going to do about this? I can't do anything. What am I going to do? I feel helpless. There's one articulation of our status as doer, as the doer, or our status of the doer. or we shift to the mind, like, okay, how am I going to take extraordinary abstract considerations and bring those to bear on this, on their own or in the service of doership? And then the third is, I'm the body, and therefore I'm afraid. I notice that everything feels like it's collapsing around me, and I, comma, the body, comma, could collapse or perish with it. Yeah. Now we can situate those three very simple identifications within the story you're also telling. It's a story of the loss of any kind of cosmology and any genuine theology, any loss of a cosmos and the waning of the divine in modernity. So Pascal is a great reference point. You know this as well as I, and I always misquote it, but he's noticing the shift from, okay, great, you're fine with a misquote. I'm very good at misquoting.
I'm brilliant. Yes.
He's noticing the shift from the end of the medieval period and the birth of the new science, and he's remarking on things like black holes or things prior to the black holes you're describing. He says, this infinite space fills me with dread. So the mathematicization of space and the collapse of a cosmos is filling him with a new kind of dread. There's a lack of purchase, something his life can't really lean on. He can't put himself in touch with reality in the ways that once were possible. So viewers might not know that, because we've grown up in this kind of forgetfulness, that most cultures have had a cosmos, which is a well-ordered, organic, meaningful, I'm using that word on a purpose, whole. And it's a whole in the sense there can't be a nature or anything that's set over and against us. No, we are, and it's hard to even put it in dualistic language. We are enmeshed in it, involved in it, engrossed in it, saturated by it. We can't think ourselves out of it, and so on. So we've grown up instead after the collapse of the cosmos, and then we could talk about that too, after the waning of the divine, with the consequence that we stand in any of these three modes as self-possessive individuals, and we look over existentialism, right? And existentialism seems to confirm. It begins from this place of collapse and starts philosophizing therefrom. And therefore we think that there couldn't possibly, in Rortian terms, be any meaning out there. There's nothing out there to be discovered, because there is no cosmos and there is no divine. And therefore we're thrown back on ourselves in order to accept our responsibility for living in exile. And it's at this point that, to come back to your example of the building I haven't seen, but now I'm riffing on, that that we begin to see architecture that has a kind of cold, profane, functional stance it takes toward everything around it. Because how could there possibly be worship, which is about reverence for that which is most worth reverencing? How could there possibly be reverence? Because there is nothing, and I'm obviously using kind of these Western metaphors of what's on high. It wouldn't have to be the case. I'm just doing the best I can to signal some kind of hardcore arrangement. So this crisis, therefore, is revealing to us obviously the long march modernity. And the long march modernity is showing that we are spiritually impoverished, such that all we have left is survival. I know we need to survive now. I'm not disputing that. I mean, I know it's the case that someone's here to survive, but there's no for whatness that is provided by cosmos and by theos, by the divine.
And what we're left, one of the things that we're interested in, you and I, is leisure. Otium cum dignitate, true skole, which is the beginning of all of culture, of all true civilization. You can't have it without it, right? So but what we have is, we've got some sort of leisure, like free time from work. But what we're doing there is, we're actually muse, otium, skole is there to worship the gods, the divine.
Right.
That's what it was there for. is the original title of Joseph Pieper's book is Muße und Kult, which is leisure and cultus or cultus, worship, you could say.
Right.
Leisure and worship. We used to worship God on the seventh day, for example. But now we're idolizing.
Leisure as worship. Leisure is nothing but worship.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's, you can't get to ultim cum dignitate without this worship of, let's just say, something higher. Because if that breaks away, you're self-idolizing. And I think what's happening, and this is totally, this is now accelerating because of the virus, but something I've been talking about for, 6 months or whatever. I gave a talk in Berlin in October on the apocalypse of the subject. And so subjectivity what is subjectivity, right? And I don't mean that, you and I can say I. What I mean is that the subject, the human being, becomes subject as ground for everything that is, and takes himself, herself, as the ultimate principle or of reason, the ultimate sufficient principle of reason, and as that ground generates the objectivity of the objective world. And of course, this is all predicated, as you put it, to the self-certainty or self-positiveness or something you said like that, right? So this is Cartesian. The Cartesian paradigm is at the onset of modernity. It's kind of where it all ignites, is with the Descartes articulates this. I'm not saying that he causes it. I'm saying he articulates what's in the making in history already. And then this is accelerated over the past 500 years. And we're now at a point where I think the self-certainty is kind of beginning to slip away. The younger generations are already feeling this. So, right, the Friday for Future. Think about this title, and you can think about them. What do you want? And some of the old generations find them ridiculous. Some of them find them, want to support them, obviously. But why would the kids go march for their future? Because they feel, I think, that there is something at stake, which is that there's something taken. The future is taken. And if the future is taken, that doesn't mean that the blank slate is taken. That also actually means that the past is being taken from them. You can't have a future without the past. It's so blatantly obvious. However, we have to remind people of this, that without origin, no future. You can't be who you are now without having been what you were before. And that's, of course, an extended self relation. But with Descartes, it's down to just the isolated self that is totally self-certain in its own being. And then with the death of God, this certainty breaks away. And this is now accelerating, where I think what we're seeing also, just even without the virus, is cracks already in this self-certainty about, can we actually control the entire planet? And now this virus kicks in almost, weirdly enough, at the right time, you could say, where this has already begun to crack and showing us how fragile, finite everything is. And just as an aside, this is a moment for great honesty too, right? If you're not being honest now, then just don't even try, because right now, if you don't say what you think, just don't even say it. And something else I wanted to say, a point about in reference to what you said about how we live, is in the cosmology, to me at least, so if we speak of wholeness, then there is a certain stillness there also, a certain calm. Because if we are in the world, the world is inherently meaningful. It lights up with meaning. What I see is beautiful, and that meaning is beautiful, right? That's it lights up in its own right? An animal isn't just livestock that I can, this is my source of protein.
That's how I tend to think about it.
I don't think so. Yeah, I know. But I think there's a certain stillness about this world, because it doesn't, because once what you want is absolute self-certainty about yourself and about your will to manage and control the planet. What this will actually tries to conceal from itself is anxiety and a certain void, right? And that's why it needs to be more efficient every day and optimize more and more and more. And it's in quicksand, right? It's in quicksand. Do you know Munchausen, who tries to pull himself out of the quicksand?
No,
You
I
know that
don't. But
story, Baron von Münchhausen? That's a German
uh,
fairy tale. He's a
uh,
baron who tells the story of how he was capable of pulling himself out of a swamp or quicksand.
yeah,
And that's what the will to will. This is what this global operation that you
yes.
can call globalization or the global economy, whatever you want to call it, this is what this is trying to do. And it knows no stillness. And very interestingly, I've just been reading,
Mm.
briefly, I've just been reading Plato's Critias dialogue
Oh
on
yeah.
Atlantis. And because this is also maybe, in line with this, the second axial age, perhaps, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There are these civilizational shifts that do occur, and Atlantis is the story that the Greeks told themselves about such a tremendous shift.
yeah. Mm.
And what does Plato say? Why did they become so complacent and so arrogant that the city sank in the ocean? Well, the harbor, and he only mentions this en passant, the harbor never stood still. They
Mm.
made the night day and the day a hazardous unrest. So Plato speaks of confusion, of virvar, I think, so like, tremendous confusion, noise.
Mhm.
And that is, then that leads on in the dialogue to the fact that Atlantis basically lost it because they knew
Right.
no stillness, but stillness is origin, right?
Mhm.
I said
Mhm.
yesterday in a conversation with Guy Sangstock,
Yeah.
this is a time to question everything. We are told that everything started with a big bang, big noise and chaos, and maybe not. Maybe it just all started with stillness, right? Maybe this is
Well,
a time.
stillness, I mean, for Advaita Vedanta, for example,
Yeah.
or for Taoism, there is always already stillness. And if you want to talk about the Big Bang, it's that which would arise out of stillness without being identical with the stillness. And you can find that also in Zen Buddhism. A lot of these non-dual traditions are actually such that they can allow one to taste the stillness of being. And perturbations are always already derivative. Movement, the metaphysic here is always such that stillness is being, or whatever we wish to call it, and movement is the arising out of stillness. So in modernity, we end up losing or forgetting stillness as such, and we only know movement. And I want to come back to some of the things that you said, and maybe just put some things together before we proceed. So you've got two different things going on. The first is that we have a kind of the collapse of cosmology and theology.
Yeah.
But it's also occurring at the same time that we're talking about the rise of, you're calling, and Heidegger is calling that Cartesian subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So the Cartesian subject takes its stance as itself, as self-grounding, and the world becomes objectified. And we can say more about that. I'm just trying to get viewers up to speed here, those who aren't so familiar with Descartes. Now, I want to just give an example to illustrate what it's like to live in a Cartesian world. Just one simple example from a conversation I had years ago with an Englishman. He said, I feel so alone. I'm paraphrasing once again. I feel so alone. And it feels as if I have to make everything up from scratch. That's a nice little articulation of what it's like to live in a Cartesian world. I feel as though I have to almost each day, like Penelope, so to speak, make things up from scratch. I don't draw on traditions. I'm not, as Alistair McIntyre said, I'm not woven into the warp and woof of various traditions. I don't draw on a communitarian notion that I draw life from a community. I'm not drawing myself from kind of a Levinasian view of being for the other.
Yeah.
There is no webbing, as it were, right? So I'm taking my stance as the one who is supposed to generate seemingly everything from nothing. It's a very, very strange stance that we've gotten used to. And it comes out in two different ways. Or at least two different ways. One, individually, people feel more existentially alone. There is more angst. That just is the case. I've spoken with a number of people over the years for whom being alone is the worst fate imaginable. And I'm almost quoting there. One woman said recently, she doesn't like to be alone because she fears being with herself. My reply is, who else can you always be with? You're always with yourself. And we talked a little more than that. That's probably not sufficient consolation.
Yeah.
But that's a nice articulation of what it feels like to be. I'm trying to give a very, very simple fleshly account of that kind of subjectivity at the individual level. I feel as if I am with myself, and being with myself is to a degree horrifying, even if it's also for some people exhilarating. So that's the first point. Then at a collective level, or an economic and political level, as we already pointed out, we're seeing the predominance of the will over, I'm going to call it apprehension. I don't want to use intellect because that can be misunderstood. Think of Pieper again. In leisure, this is how I put it, in leisure, I am open to apprehending reality.
Yeah.
Right. So the apprehension is a gift. There's a kind of perfume to mix metaphors. And all that I need to do is still myself such that I'm open to what it is that I'm able to now apprehend. So there isn't that in modernity. This is why, as we were saying before, just very briefly, free time is just another kind of doership. It's still the predominance of the will over various domains of life. So at the same time that we see the collapse of any cosmos, the bosom of being, that unfolding and enmeshing of life, at the same time that we see the waning of anything divine, anything that's worthy of our prayers, our contemplations, our worships, we also, in a vicious feedback loop, see the arising and hegemony of the subject of the kind that you're speaking about. And that's the position we're in right now, because, and this is what I'm trying to get to, just behind the back of the Cartesian subject is anxiety, or is void. Buddhists would call it lack. What do you think that's all about? Why would it be the case that there would be, just behind the back of the subject, that's precisely what the subject cannot see, a kind of void?
Well, it's when you think of when you think of Descartes' meditations, interestingly enough, the book's called Meditations. What he does is, for listeners who maybe don't know, is he methodically calls everything into doubt, including his own body, including, and that's where it gets quite cruel, the people outside his window. So they can be just robots. For all I know, they might just be machines, very sophisticated machines, but still. And then he withdraws into himself. Now, if meditations means a caring for beings in their being, then he's doing the exact opposite. And what he's left with is his ego thinking of itself. That's where everything gets anchored, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that's an unconditional. That's something that is supposedly unconditional. Mm-hmm. Immanuel Kant says in the first critique that the unconditional is the unfathomable abyss for human reason. So there is, in all of this explosion of abstract intelligence, Hegel and Schelling and they all kind of struggle with the abyss and try to get over it, or just push it to the side. It doesn't even matter. And then of course you get to Nietzsche, who's got a very interesting relationship with the abyss. But then you get to someone like Heidegger, who would say, no, we have to begin with the void. If there is a jug in front of me, a jug in which there is wine, the wine, of course, only becomes wine when it is, a gift, when it is accepted as a gift granted from the earth and then sacrificed in our drinking to the gods. And that's when wine becomes wine. Mm-hmm. But you have to begin with the void of that. Somehow around that void the thing begins to show itself. What we do is we hold on to ourselves as a something that, that's me.
As something, yes, or somebody.
Yeah, something.
That's enough. Yeah, that's a nice starting point, right? I am something, or somebody.
Yes.
I take that as my starting point mistakenly, and I forget that every tradition that I'm familiar with, especially in the East, says that can't possibly be true. You have erased the genuine starting point, the genuine baseline, which is that it begins with no thing and no body. It's just the Tao says, the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao.
Yeah.
Right. The life force, the essential principle or life force of all that's going to arise in what they call the 10,000 things, concrete particulars.
Yeah.
Is unnameable, unfathomable, but for all that, not necessarily, and this is the key point I'm trying to make here, not necessarily scary. It just is so. It's nothing to run from. It is.
Yeah.
But in modernity, we run from it, and we forgot we were running from it.
Yeah, I mean, to make this the extreme, this is overly simplified, but you run from death, it'll come back to haunt you. You run from negativity, it'll come back to haunt you as well. But what all of Western metaphysics, not all, but overly simplified, but what Western metaphysics could be described as is that it tries to corroborate being. It tries to ratify it. And we're now in techniques, right? We do this. This is the self is the quantities that I can measure about myself. Mm-hmm. I am what my Apple Watch tells me. I am 12,000 steps in a day at that and that heart rate. So that's I'm that quantified or quantum self, whatever people refer to it like. And what Heidegger calls authentic nihilism, a difficult term, but authentic nihilism would be to begin with being which always already withdraws. Yeah. Being is that which is withdrawing, right? Or self-concealing. Right? It's entzieht sich. There's always this draw. This is why for Heidegger, in one of his texts, what is calling us to thinking, he says that Socrates was the purest of all thinkers because he didn't even write anything down. Right. He just stood in that draw of being purely. That's how Heidegger envisioned this. But yes, this is so he sees it even present in the Western tradition. It's just that it didn't uphold, sort of, or it didn't come to the, yeah.
Right. The interesting thing that would take a little while to prize apart would be to say the following.
Yeah.
One, with Heidegger and with Zen, to stand in the withdrawal or draw of being is meditation first and foremost. And then secondly, interestingly, from standing in that presumed void, and by the way, void is also fullness here, right? Void is also plenitude, is at the same time to open oneself up to caring for others.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's hard to see that transition perhaps, but it's clear if we say the following.
Yeah.
If I take myself to be a self-standing subject whose will is emanated in the world, then it's also clear that I may take others as objects and so forth. But if I take my stand in the being that is in this elementary emptiness, to use Zen language, or fullness, to say the same thing, then I'm also coming back in such a way that I'm open to all things, and I shouldn't even say things, even though I mean it in a neutral sense, to all beings arising.
Yeah.
I'm welcoming the family of all beings that are.
Yeah, and to very briefly, Dostoevsky in Brothers Karamazov describes Ivan, one of the brothers, is visited in a vision that he has by the devil, and the devil says to him, "I am the self that emanates." I'm misquoting, of course, but this is I'm paraphrasing, shall we say,
Yeah.
but this is the devil. It's the devil who emanates the world. And Dostoevsky saw this very presently, right? This is also exactly the story. I mean, not exactly, but this is a similar story in Dr. Faustus by Goethe, is that Faust is the modern subject who studies everything. And then he says, and hier stehe ich nun nicht armer Tor und bin als klug als wie zuvor. Here I am, me poor fool, I poor fool. I'm still just as smart as before, as clever as before. I still don't know, I still know nothing, but he wants to know. And he's willing to know, he's willing to have absolute certainty.
Yes.
Gets him to sign in blood a contract with the devil, to sell his soul, and then of course to destroy innocence in the form of Chrétien, and to push the world into a devil's nightmare. And so that's it's weirdly enough that, I mean, just to give you, sort of a motto, it's by letting go that you come to yourself. I mean, it's too simple, but that's what it is, right? It's you want something too much, it'll look just you don't even have to get philosophical, it'll look willed, it'll look artificial, it'll look positioned. You let go and it usually will come. That's also what a relationship is like. If it's a loving and caring relationship, you don't will for someone else, even if you want the best for them, right? But you don't will them to do something. Right. You let go of what you think is good, and you can offer, right? You can offer guidance. You can say, perhaps this is one way of doing this or going about this. But you open up a certain space as a suggestion, but you cannot emanate or dominate the other person's by you willfully dominating the other one. That's the opposite of love. That's not coming together and finding a home together. It's not being grounded together. That's the opposite. So it feels like concern, but it isn't. Right? It's actually in this letting go that this is then coming together. It's very difficult to do this, obviously, right? Because we want.
Is it difficult?
No, but
is it difficult?
No, I think
you said by letting go.
Yeah,
one comes to oneself, and then you're describing in a way what that's like. My earnest yet wry question to you is that really difficult?
I think that what we're seeing is that it's very difficult.
I would say it's the simplest thing in the world.
Is it? Is it for Westerners? Do you think it is?
It's like I mean, there's a yes and no here, right? It's what you're describing is such an elementary, natural stance to take. It's so clear once you see it. It's like hearing a tune for the first time. You start to pick up on it. What's hard? We're playing right now. What's hard is having to continue to ground yourself in an anxious subject, willing certainty. I think one philosopher calls it the rage for certainty, while at the same time knowing in the darkest hours when you are alone that there's an existential hole. That's in some respects very hard. We found how hard it is to keep this up.
Yeah.
Keep it up individually and to keep it up politically and economically. So in some respects, I'm just playing here. In some respects, that's the hardest thing to do. In some respects, the easiest thing to do is to let go.
Of course. I mean, yes, ultimately it is. But when you look at the current situation, sure, the obvious response to this should be to simply let go of any kind of, I mean, for I'm not saying that this is easy for people who live paycheck to paycheck, but those who are, work at banks, for example, in the city of London, who will have made enough money, it would have been easy weeks ago to just let go perhaps and work from home immediately to stop the spread. But why would I have to let go, right? It's subjectivity wanting to hold on to itself. That's why I'm saying it's hard. It's because this self-certainty must continuously will itself and enact itself and will sort of almost reify itself, and then cannot let go of itself, and must ever greater force, and this is then on a planetary scale now, an ever greater force must enact itself. And I think in that sense, so if we look at it from the Cartesian perspective, that's why I think it is very difficult to let go. And it might be in a moment of shock, right? Because nothing seems to, almost nothing seems to shock us back into existence. And perhaps this is
we're back to I understand. The only reason I was turning around is to say, so yes, it is the most. Let's speak in paradoxes if we need to. What we're describing is the phenomenon called the will to will, or the phenomenon we're describing, the modern adventure,
yeah,
is staked to its indefinite continuation, and as such, it is, from that point of view, the hardest thing in the world for it to let go, right?
Yes, because
one of my Zen teachers says the opening the hand, right?
Yeah,
the fist.
It's
the hardest
cramped.
thing seems to be opening the hand.
Yes.
I was just trying to suggest that, on the other hand, so to speak, it's the easiest thing in the world once you get it to open up your hand that's been cramped.
Yeah, of course, because
so I want to make that clear to people. When I philosophize with them, they're staked to certain positions, they're staked to certainty or whatever. But it's really interesting is that once they start to have an existential opening, as I've called it, or a shock, as you might have referred to it, once there's a crack, as you called it before,
yeah,
once there's the slightest crack, and once there's the invitation given, and I would also say with Peter Kingsley, once there's a deep sense of helplessness or deep sense of the falling, I can't do anything, then it becomes the easiest thing in the world to open up your hand. And you think to yourself, at least at an individual level, why did it take me so long to learn something so simple? This is such a natural thing to do. It's very natural to be in the world in such a way as to be, to varying degrees, open to arisings, to be open to unfoldings. This is the way I've been reading Socrates. I've been reading Socrates in a Taoist key for many years. I think that he was someone who was extraordinarily open, very supple, and willing to go wherever it was that the inquiry wanted to go. We all have our idealizations of Socrates. This is mine. But it seems to me that once you catch that, once you start to feelingly understand it, it makes perfectly good sense in a way that's hard to put into words. So that was my little
just as
provocation. Yes, so that's my provocation when it comes to how difficult, easy these things are.
In pure philosophical terms, when concealment is strongest, that's where unconcealment is also, right? That there's there's no distinction between them on the most fundamental level. So Hölderlin poetizes, where there is danger, there is the saving grace also. Wo die Gefahr ist, da ist das Rettende auch in German. You cannot have one without the other. So yes, it's on some level the easiest, but one has to be pushed or shocked, I think, into, at this point, really literally shocked into that possibility. And
why don't we turn toward that shock then? Because earlier on you were talking about how this could point us to another way of being.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to weigh in, but first, what do you think okay.
Yeah,
all right. So we're thinking here about the condition of possibility for a newfound openness in culture, or the condition of possibility for a certain kind of awakening, as it were.
Yeah.
And the question I have to mind is, what is the likelihood that we'll begin to see this shock actually revealing to us a different way of being? And I'm going to say a few things, and I'm thinking aloud with you, because this is not something that I've yet really considered at great depth in any fashion. The first is an intuition. It was the intuition I had some time ago around January or February. I thought, the Chinese are my neighbors. That they're not just people living halfway across the world in their own situation, and,
Yeah.
and they're not situated here in some kind of geopolitical struggle of some kind or another, and they're not just involved in some way of containing a biological thread. I started to feel that they were my brothers, as Saint Francis might say. Right? I had this slight intuition that they were no longer foreigners or strangers, but rather neighbors. And I wonder whether that's something we can't start to see arising in people around the world. We've noticed the uptick, at least on Twitter, of people talking about care and concern. And it's been quite moving for me to at least notice this. We've started to notice, I think, people involved in what I call giving or gifts.
Yeah.
That goes beyond mere market economics. And that's a suggestion that there might be meditation in that one sense in which you're speaking about meditation as care or concern for the being of beings.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, and the other one, that's one little sign that we might be seeing the emergence of what Ewart Cousins in his book Christ in the 21st Century, the book that set off in the course of the possibility of a second axial age, calls global consciousness. Could there be global consciousness here anchored perhaps in the idea of everyone being my neighbor? So that's the first intimation I have. The second one is the darker one, and it just suggests that I think that we're going to have people who are falling into such levels of helplessness. Some people will fall into such levels of helplessness that at that very moment there is a possibility of grace. When William James describes this very well in the Varieties of Religious Experience.
Yeah.
He's going through a number of different Christian mystics, and as I recall, a number of cases, it's only when they stopped efforting, only when they stopped willing, for all this time to so to say reach the divine, that it became clear that the divine was always already here in the form of grace. There's one Sufi mystic whom I can't quite recall who says something like, "I kept looking for you, oh God. I kept going out looking for you. But when I turned around, you were always here." Right? All I had to do was turn around. Evelyn Underhill also speaks about this in her book Mysticism. She suggests that everyone is trying to go out. I'm using God here at the moment in a fairly figurative sense, but we could probably talk about it in a more literal sense if that were needed. She talks about how maybe it's the case that we ourselves have been going away from the divine. The divine is always here. So if we just stop trying to go out by means of our will to search for something or other we call the ultimate, and simply let go, as you beautifully put it, and turn around, that it may come. And I think those tend to come for people in moments of great hopelessness. This is a very dark thing to say, but it's also a luminous thing to say in times of hopelessness, helplessness, cluelessness, powerlessness, all of which suggests that I can't will anymore. So those are my just two different clues. One having to do with the positive development of a new kind of ethic. Maybe it's an old kind of ethic, but revamped for our time. And the other one is coming out of the dark night of the soul, as it were. Well, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Briefly, perhaps on Socrates. So aporia is usually, I think, translated as paradox, right? And that implies something that's logically difficult to make sense of, etc. And very often these early dialogues, they end on a question mark.
Yeah.
But aporia means, you know this, roadlessness or pathlessness. There's all of a sudden the road ends. But that's an invitation. Yeah. That's an invitation to continue, speaking the cliche, off the beaten track. So it isn't, in this sense, we're not just paralyzed by Socrates. We're asked to find another path. And I can...
Well, we're first asked to know how to stop, I would say.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little worried about the entrepreneurs with whom I speak who always say, "What's next?" Which is a knee-jerk reaction out of anxiety. So the first thing we're learned is that the pathless path is creating that kind of mental confusion, which is another translation of aporia. It's I can't think my way out of this at this moment. I'm turned about. I'm lost.
Yeah.
The stopping is the first one. We're just stopping. And then oh, in the stopping, there arises the possibility of another off the beaten path, as you said.
And that's what the word catastrophe, which is Greek, means. Catastrophe means to turn around from within, to lead onto a turning, but it is something ultimately in mythology sent from the gods, and it is something that does go hand in hand with collapse, with great horror, and a certain hopelessness and helplessness. But that must be accepted, right? That's one of the first things to accept is this helplessness, the paralyzation, you can't do anything about this.
Yes.
And then stillness, and from stillness there will be, but this is not programmatic. I'm not saying just be still and then it'll come. No, that there is this. These are true transformations. This will be what's going to come next.
Genuine inspiration, genuine breathing into me.
Yes, and I think what currently now is, I think it's probably fair to say that we do see cracks in this seemingly perfect system, which now can only be upheld by positive thinking, by just blinding out anything. It's just you focus on what you can do and you just go on, and that sounds very tired at this point.
It's kind of a revamped or neo-stoicism of the kind I've been critical of in recent years. I think
I'm rather critical of the contemporary Stoic movement, and I have said, don't be a Roman emperor, because the Roman emperor that we always refer to, Marcus Aurelius, was in charge during the heyday of bread and circuses. That's literally the slow collapse of Rome that ensued 1,000 years of the Dark or Middle Ages in Europe. Stoicism, I think, this modern Stoicism, correct me if I'm wrong, please, preaches something like pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Suffering isn't.
It also preaches the indomitability of the will and of continuing to move in the historical fork to what's within your control. Yes. So it doesn't make the move that you and I think is necessary. I think we think it's necessary to it. I come to see that there's nothing I can do. You put it very beautifully. That's the one line I quite relish from this conversation so far. I come to see there's nothing I can do. I hope that viewers aren't misunderstanding that. I don't mean that you can't get bread or whatever else is the case, but there's, at a fundamental ontological level, the realization there's nothing I can do. Everywhere I turn is a wrong turn at the present moment. Everything I try to push my way out of reveals to me the folly of doing so.
Yeah,
and in this respect, I might say that I think we're probably differing from some of the people in Game B. And the Game B community is interested in a new operating system that leaps over the shortcomings of the one the systems that you and I have been talking about in this conversation. I can spell it out for viewers if need be. Let's say that what comes next in a fairer, more just, more decentralized, more collective, intelligence-based world. I'm sympathetic to some things they say, but the reason I'm bringing it up here is that I think it still has a kind of enterprising tint. It's still tinted or tainted by the will. And we are obviously, we're obviously a little more mystical, and we're suggesting that there has to be surrender, right?
No, because what Game B is another a priori strategy of the willing ego, right? It's like, let's sit down and make a blueprint for what the world is supposed to be like, which is just another Procrustes bed into which nature and everything is supposed to fit in, and it won't fit in. Like, we get rid of models. I mean, to wake people up now, perhaps get rid of models. There is no one model by which you can live. There isn't. Right. Get rid of that. What's the mental model I will apply to the situation? That's an a priori. This is why philosophy is real.
This is why Socratic philosophy is real. It's a model. It's a deconstruct one model after the other.
Yes, and models are at this point, what we would call worldviews. and ideologies, or maybe game B. I'm not aware of game B, and now I am. I'm going to look into it, but it sounds like an a priori synthetic judgment, by the way, of what the world is supposed to look like, which is just Kantianism, which means we're going deeper into the cave without knowing we're in the cave. We need to get out of the cave. We need to look at the sun, and as Plato describes it, it's painful. We have to live through the night to then see the tree the next day, and then out of compassion, one moves back down into the cave.
Right.
Even though this person might face death upon return.
Right.
This is how Plato describes
right.
cave, right? It's not this wonderful enlightenment moment. This, oh, look, because all of these utopian fantasies, they're just marching from one glorious achievement of human power to the next. And if we just do this, then it'll all be fine. The earliest utopian story of modernity by Thomas Morus describes a dystopian future, and was very likely, a wonderful piece of British humor, and describes a society where not even death is allowed, interestingly enough, as Adorno would, by the way, repeat in the 20th century, that utopia would come about when people don't die anymore. What I wish to see is a return of the tragic. As Nietzsche says, incipit tragedia, may tragedy begin again. Without the tragic, you cannot have beauty. There must be an irresolvable mystery at the heart of existence. That's where this intensity of life comes from. That's what emanates. This is where meaning arises, is from you don't know. And we don't know the next game. So I'm not going to sit here and say the world that will come next is the following. We will have it's just another perfect fantasy that, by the way, will never come. So it traps you in a future that's never going to happen. And that fake future cuts you off from the past, and boom, you're back in nihilism. That's nihilism. Nihilism means that you're no longer in touch with that which has been. Do you know what Aristotle calls being? I've been quoting this forever. Aristotle calls being sorry, I want to make absolutely no mistake. Toti en enai, right? Toti en enai, yes, which means that which it was being. Being is the old. Being is that which is old. It's the old. It's ancestry. It's old stories. It's the mythology. By the way, this is what Plato says in the Critias too. With leisure, we begin to appreciate the mythology of our origin, of where we come from. And then while you're in touch with this, the future opens up just by itself. It just opens up by itself by being in touch with that which has always been, as you put it. The divine has always already been there. And once you're in touch with that which has always already been there, there's no more need for a synthetic, listen to that word that Kant uses here, for a synthetic a priori judgment about a blueprint of what the world is supposed to look like. And this is why, and I'm personally just grateful for thinkers like Nietzsche, for example, who live a tragic existence, first of all. And by this lonely suffering from Nietzsche, he has sparked communities around the world. And this is something also we have to keep in mind. Right? This is someone who meditated in his own ways and in his own loneliness and in his own writings, very often, as you know, self-published also, right? Not acknowledged by anyone. Almost during his lifetime, at least not for the weirder stuff he wrote. But then by these meditations sparks ways of being later on. And I think that's the moment that we're in now, where almost in real time we're commenting on what's happening, but without giving it's like a blueprint for the next world to come, but simply provide, call it guidance perhaps, towards that which has always been, towards the mystery at the heart of existence. And in my ideal vision of this, a return of the tragic, because the tragic would allow for us to be human and not functioning machines or technocrats who are simply functionaries of technology and enacting its will, where we are. Because what does it mean to be a tragic human being? That means that you accept your own finitude, and it means to accept the finitude of everybody else around you. You see the other as a mortal being, and you see this shared suffering. in everything and everyone that is. So yeah, that's what I'd like to perhaps
in the rawness of your own experience, you find tenderness for others.
Yes, because you see all of a sudden that in everyone and everything there's something profoundly fragile, and that's beautiful. Right. And the world begins to light up. I will be very personal for a minute, if I may.
Yes.
We didn't sleep well last night. I have slept maybe 2 hours last night. It is mind-boggling what's happening.
Yes.
So my wife and I woke up at 4 a.m. and we started talking about animals.
Huh.
We've never done this. A little hedgehog. What does a hedgehog look like? What do they eat in winter? Where do they live in summer? I don't know. That's interesting. You know, a little fox. There's so many foxes around London. We've never talked about animals, sorry, in this way. We never have, because there was never the time. There was never the moment for it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I can already sense that the world is lighting up in a different light to me.
Never a certain disquietude.
Yes.
In which there was this sweetness and humor and
yes, humor. You
yes.
see,
yes.
There is no humor without tragedy.
Right.
Like one of the things you and I, and when I talk to Guy Sangstock too, we often start laughing when it gets a bit horrible. Just mention the word horror, we start laughing. Why is that? I'm not sure, but we talked about this sense of humor during our last conversation on the logic of the heart, right? We talked about this. I'm not sure what we said, but there's something.
It doesn't matter, apparently.
I mean, no, sorry. No, it's just, I think, no, because I can never say the same things twice. I think what's happening when we talk about the horrible is that when you're in tune also with the tragic sense,
yes,
horrible, you can, first of all, you can face it to some degree, not all of it, but to some degree, and it is less horrible.
Yes,
you can cope with it. It's not this ironic distancing. That's what we said last time, that we don't want to ironically distance ourselves from, the universe is expanding. Why should I do anything? But no, we want to stare into this abyss, but also show that it isn't all that there is. There's also still beauty and sweetness and humor that comes with it. So
yeah. My hope is that, if nothing else, people will see that being able to face, to look at the horror and the horrible is not the worst thing imaginable. It's actually the necessary openness we need for there to be the kinds of discussions about hedgehogs that we all should be having in our own ways.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is what human beings do. We need to dwelling, right? Dwelling, Heidegger says, means to preserve the earth, not to just concrete block for housing here. No, dwelling means to preserve the earth, but also in a way that not comfort and last man holding up in a warm, cozy place. But no, you want to have this kind of a dwelling place fit for mortals, made for mortals, where there is still a connection to the earth, but also it's a strife, right? As he says, there's a strife between world and earth. But you can't have one without the other. But as long as the strife, weirdly enough, as long as that strife is maintained and appreciated, the earth isn't destroyed, because the world, which is human, understands that without earth it wouldn't be. It needs the earth that retains itself and gifts sometimes. This is something else that could come of this. The return of seasons. Like we live in a world where seasons don't even have any meaning anymore, right? Strawberries every day. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that there wasn't everything all the time.
Right.
Now people freak out in this country and thought it was Brexit last year when they had no strawberries left at the supermarket. I started trying telling people, no, by the way, it's got nothing to do with Brexit. It's just not, maybe there's just a shortage of strawberries. This can happen.
Right. Yeah.
But I think if with a sense of the tragic and a sense of mortality, we would also even begin to build different buildings again. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not going to.
Yeah, but I think that's right. I just got back from a meditation retreat, and just want to share with you and everyone else what the French teacher said. He was someone who was not taken to sentiments, not taken to strong sentimentality. In fact, he's a very logical person in many respects. And also, I should add, a very humorous person.
Yeah.
And so I fear that my just giving you the punchline at the end won't, or the line at the end won't really do it justice. But this is what I would want from people. He said, at the end of this week, in which there's a lot of opening up for people, you're very sweet. I love you. And it was so beautiful. That kind of sentiment becomes possible when there's the tragic. And it's meant in a disinterested, i.e. impersonal manner. I'm not trying to get anything from it. He didn't need to get anything from it. He was just in the sweetness of honesty expressing how sweet it was to be together here now, and how loving it all was. It was just beautiful. And so I just want to say that to you. Thank you very much for this conversation today. It's been very, very sweet, very near and dear to my heart. And
Thank you,
yeah,
as always.
I loved it.